So the webinar today is FireSmart in BC. My name is Kate Murphy and I'm from the Fraser Basin Council, and my colleague Jim Vanderwall is also with me on the webinar. The webinar today is brought to you by a number of different players, one of which is the BC Regional Adaptation Collaborative, which supports local governments, First Nations, and industries in integrating climate change adaptation into their decision-making and planning. And we also have a portal for adaptation resources online, and you can find that on retooling.ca. And just a quick note to people, we'll mention this later, but if you have your audio on, please mute it for now so that there's no echo. Thanks so much. There's a number of other players who have also brought this wildfire and climate change webinar series to you, including the Association of BC Forest Professionals, the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resource Operations and Rural Development, the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy, and also Natural Resources Canada, and of course our two lovely webinar presenters today. A couple of things on the retooling.ca adaptation portal. There's a newsletter that you can subscribe to in the highlighted box, where you can get adaptation resources and funding opportunities. And we also post all of our adaptation webinars online, and this one will be posted online afterwards as well. A couple of quick event announcements. The Adaptation Canada 2020 conference is coming up next February 19th to 21st in Vancouver. And if you'd like to sign up for email updates on, for instance, when registration is opening, you can do so at bit.ly/adapt2020. And the next webinar in this series will be the Identifying Barriers to Community Action webinar by Al Westhaver. And for those of you that are just on the phone, you can register for that at www.retooling.ca/news_events.html. Couple logistics. I still hear a bit of an echo in the background, so that seems to have, no, it's still there. Please keep your audio muted. You can do that in your control panel. There's a little button that has an audio sign on it. You can just make it red. Please keep that muted so we don't have any feedback. If you have any questions, you can do so in the control panel. There's a little question box where you can write that in, and do that anytime throughout the webinar. You don't have to wait till the end, but the question period will be at the end. If you have any technical difficulties, you can either put that in the question box, or you can address your difficulties to fraserbasin@gmail.com, and Jim will get back to you about that. So today's speakers are Kelly Johnston, who's a technical advisor of FireSmart Canada, and Amanda Reynolds, who's a FireSmart Coordinator of the BC Wildfire Services. They're going to do a bit more of an introductions of themselves. So I'll just pass that over to Kelly.
Thank you, Kate. And thanks for everyone for joining us. Amanda and I are going to speak on FireSmart in British Columbia. And Amanda is stepping in for Kelsey Winter. So thank you, Amanda. And we'll move forward here. Okay, and so I am actually representing FireSmart Canada, and we're working in partnership with the British Columbia FireSmart Committee and with regards to supporting them and rolling FireSmart out in British Columbia. And I'll hand it over to you, Amanda, to talk about yourself.
Reynolds, I've worked for the BC Wildfire Service for 4 years. I'm originally born and bred true Vancouverite, and I was a teacher for the past 7 years and have been in Prince George for 4 years. Started out as a dispatcher for the BC Wildfire Service, and then I quickly moved into fire information, what I've been doing for the past 3 seasons, and just getting more and more involved with prevention and FireSmart, and I'll be able to talk more about that after Kelly.
Thanks, Amanda. And as Kate mentioned, my name is Kelly Johnston. I'm the FireSmart Canada technical lead. I am a registered professional forester in British Columbia, a fire behavior specialist, and I have spent a lot of time working as a wildfire mitigation specialist. I work all over North America and abroad on the wildland-urban interface issue, and I am an appointed member of the National Research Council of Canada, Wildland-Urban Interface Technical Committee, and the National Fire Protection Association Technical Committee on Wildland and Rural Fire Protection. And so the first thing we wanted to do was just ask a quick question, and I think you'll get a poll there. But just in one or two sentences, if you can tell us what your definition of the wildland-urban interface is. And I posted a couple of photos here on the slide to help guide you. These are areas that we would consider wildland-urban interface. And so just take a few minutes to provide that response.
And actually, if you guys could write it in the question box, and we'll make that public. We didn't have a poll that was big enough to include as many answers as we wanted to. Okay, so Kelly, some of the answers that you're getting are edge of a settled area, proximity between housing and forests, the area where wildland and urban area meet, all of BC, the physical connection including air between forest and urban locations, halfway there. And Jim is just making all of this public so everybody can see the answers. There's quite a few coming in, so.
Okay, thanks, Kate. And so what I want to do is just move forward a little bit to sort of bring us all onto the same page with what the wildland-urban interface is with respect to where FireSmart looks at it. And so really what we're trying to do with FireSmart is we're really trying to do is interrupt the wildland-urban interface disaster cycle. And we're seeing this becoming more and more prevalent in particularly in recent years in Western Canada, Alberta, and British Columbia, and unprecedented wildland-urban interface disasters in California late in 2018. And, you know, when we look at what we used to look at California 20 or 30 years ago, we used to say, well, that's California. And, you know, they were losing a few hundred homes at a time. Then we bring that to BC, you know, fast forward 20 years later, and we see that that we're losing, you know, a few hundred homes at a time, and even over 2,400 homes in the Fort McMurray Horse River fire incident. And now California's in the past 2018 lost just over 30,000 homes in a fire season. So we can see a trend. I mean, the only difference between us and California is that we have a land base that's in British Columbia roughly 3 times the size of California, and a population that's a tenth the size of California. But with that population increasing, unless we take some steps, I'm certain we'll end up in that situation. So when we talk about the WUI disaster cycle, or the wildland-urban interface disaster cycle, it was a concept originally developed by Dr. Jack Cohen from the USDA Forest Service. And what he talks about is the idea of wildland fire escaping initial attack. And in British Columbia, we're very good at initial attack, well over 90% at successfully stopping fires less than 4 hectares, or they get any bigger. But it's those small percentage of fires that are escaping, and because we've got more and more homes on the landscape, it's moving into the wildland-urban interface. Threatening structures and infrastructures are what we call built fuels. And then finally, what we're seeing is those structures are igniting all at the same time and turning into what we call an urban conflagration. Multiple structure ignitions simultaneously, and then quickly overwhelming the wildfire and structural fire suppression resources and becoming a disaster. And so quickly, how do structures ignite? Well, some definitely ignite through direct convective or radiant heat from the flame front, but most structures actually ignite from firebrands or ember transport through the air. And this is where we get those multiple ignitions all at the same time. And I just want to take a short stop is, although we're talking mainly about structures themselves, we have to remember that when we frame wildfire risk, we're actually looking at all the initial impacts of wildfire as well as the ongoing impacts, economic, social, health impacts, ecological, and some of the compounding natural hazards that occur after a wildfire. So the loss of structures is really the start and the symbolic input, but we can certainly see that there's a ton of ongoing losses that keep occurring that we should be considering when we're talking about wildfire risk. So when we take all this into account, we really look at the wildland-urban interface as really being a set of conditions. And it's a set of conditions that allows for the ignition and spread of fire through both the vegetative and the built fuel component of a community. And so when we're framing this in how we would define the wildland-urban interface, we can say that it's any area where the combination of human development and vegetation have a potential to result in negative impacts from wildfire on the community. So that's really what we're looking at on a large scale of what the wildland-urban interface is. And so that helps us take a look at who may be responsible for mitigating that. And the answer really is everybody, right from the private landowner and homeowner all the way out to the provincial land managers and including the Indigenous communities and First Nations, as well as industry. And so we can say that it's not just a government problem and it's not just a private homeowner problem, it's an everybody problem to mitigate. And so that's where FireSmart Canada comes in. And FireSmart Canada is a program of the nonprofit Partners in Protection. And Partners in Protection is a multidisciplinary group that works together in creating fire-adapted communities. So some of our goals are to increase interagency cooperation, empower the public, and increase community resilience to wildfire. And ultimately, what we want to do is reduce the wildfire risk to property, infrastructure, and public safety in the wildland-urban interface by helping communities become fire-adapted. So we know fires are going to occur on the land, and we know that that's not going to go away. We tried for close to 100 years to make that go away. So our options are to accept that and create fire-adapted communities. FireSmart is based on 7 disciplines, one being vegetation management, development, public education, legislation, interagency cooperation, cross-training, and emergency planning. And all of those 7 disciplines together form the basis for FireSmart. Just to note that FireSmart is a national priority. It's identified in the Canadian Wildland Fire Strategy through the objective of minimizing the risk to public safety and property by developing and implementing the Canadian FireSmart initiative with distinct components addressing mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And the Canadian Wildland Fire Strategy was developed by the Canadian Council of Forest Ministers. So all of the representatives, territorial and provincial representatives across Canada. And the partnership piece really shows itself when we see that there's membership and support in 9 provinces and territories across the country, as well as local government and business and industry. We also have strong working relationships with the National Fire Protection Association, Fire Adapted Communities out of the US, the Cooperators Group, which is an insurance provider, a national level insurance provider, the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, and the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. We provide a number of major publications and outreach materials that are available for across the country, including our cornerstone document, the FireSmart Protecting Your Communities from Wildfire. And when we look at FireSmart, looking at what we just discussed, FireSmart is really at all scales, and applying it at all scales helps us become fire adapted. So we're really looking at addressing the landscape zone, the community zone, and the immediate interface zone in a community. When we specifically talk about addressing the structural vulnerabilities to wildfire, we're really talking about the FireSmart priority zones. And those zones include the Zone 1A or non-combustible zone from 0 meters out to 1.5 meters from the furthest extent of the structure. And in the Zone 1 are the heavily managed zone of 1.5 to 10 meters from the structure. Zone 2 is typically where you're going to see some forest thinning, but still see the presence of trees and forest from 10 meters to 30 meters. And in Zone 3, extending out to 100 meters from the structure, where you're going to see still see some forest and fuel mitigation, mostly managing fire intensity and ember production. When we talk about priority zone 1 and the mitigation activities, it's things like roofing materials, vegetation that can provide flammable vegetation that can provide wicks or radiant heat within that 10-meter zone. Things like firewood or deck furniture that can provide that radiant heat source, and maintenance or small little things like gaps or cracks in the siding or doors of a structure that will allow embers to enter the structure. So we're really dealing with the radiant heat within that 10 meters to out to 30 meters and the susceptibility to embers of the structure itself. When we look at priority zones 2 and 3, we look at forest fuel management or vegetation management mostly, and it centers around pruning ladder fuels, reducing surface fuels, and even thinning trees out and opening the canopy. When we put all this together, in most communities, we can see that those home ignition zones or structure ignition zones that encompass those priority zones tend to overlap between structures. So it really does become a neighborhood problem. And because it's a neighborhood problem, it ends up becoming a community problem. Typically what we'll see is an individual homeowner can address their home ignition zone as far as they can to their property line. But if it extends into their neighbor's property line, unless the neighbor actually undertakes the same treatments, that ends up becoming the weak link and can still be a threat to the neighborhood and the entire community. So we start with a number of community and neighborhood engagement programs, such as the FireSmart Community Recognition Program, which includes recognition for local government for their good work engaging with FireSmart, and the Wildfire Community Preparedness Day program, which is ongoing right now and will be, the Community Preparedness Day will be May 5th this year. When we talk about individual structures, we can see a lot of evidence coming out of the US, and there is discussion in Canada. It's starting to be discussion in Canada amongst the insurance providers. In the US, we're seeing insurance providers really taking the wildfire situation seriously and, in fact, mitigating their risk by not providing insurance in some areas where wildfire is considered unacceptable risk. With the program that we are involved in and the guidelines that we provide, we can actually address those risks based on science and best practices. And that brings us to the FireSmart Home Partners program, where the FireSmart Home Partners program really focuses on community stakeholder collaboration, professional level assessments, and accounts for the variability in specific site characteristics across British Columbia, throughout a community, and across Canada. And in the end, it provides a clear work plan for homeowners and measurable wildfire risk reduction for a community. It relies heavily on technology to assist the small communities in reducing their administrative load. And that includes an integrated program with mobile application, a central database, and the ability to push that data out into other applications that the community may be using. In the end, provides a great homeowner guidance with a really detailed work plan that hopefully will help the homeowner move forward with clear direction. And at this point, the training, it requires a training program to have these professional level mitigation specialists trained to a standard, coordination both at locally and national levels, and outreach and education. Right now, our biggest stumbling block on this is aligning the national, provincial, and local political support and the necessary funds to sustain this program from the local level all the way to the national level. Moving out to the landscape and community zones, we're really starting where many of the provinces are working with First Nations, multi-agencies, and in industry collaboration to work on things like strategic harvesting patterns and sequences, and fire hazard management or debris management on harvested sites. And then finally, addressing forest health that can change the structure of the vegetation surrounding a community. So in the end, FireSmart really equals options. It equals increased community resilience to wildfire by reducing risk and losses. It increases the ability of land managers to sustainably manage forest ecosystems appropriately. And it increases the ability of agencies to successfully manage wildland fire with all the tools that they have. So finally, creating a fire adapted and FireSmart Canada. And I'll pass it over to Amanda now.
So I think before I get started, I think there's going to be a poll question, so we'll just wait.
Okay, so Amanda and Kelly, for your benefit, since you cannot see the results, the poll results on a scale of 1 to 5, it looks like people are generally at a level 3 of knowledge on FireSmart, with 31% for 3. About 21% have been involved in a FireSmart project, 19% are at level 4, and 1 and 2 are at about 29% in total.
Great. Okay, so just a quick agenda. I'm just going to briefly talk about the 2017 and 2018 wildfire seasons, and I'll give a brief outlook for 2019, and then just going to talk about the role of FireSmart, the BC FireSmart Committee, the regional FireSmart committees, and then the FireSmart BC education package. Before Kelly switched to the next slide, I definitely encourage everyone to take a note of the website, www.firesmartbc.ca, and take some moments after this call and over the weekend to take a look at this awesome website that was launched end of January. So just starting with a review of the past 2 seasons, I was lucky enough to be very well involved in both the 2017 and the 2018 wildfire seasons. I spent almost 40 days down in Williams Lake in 2017. Change slides, Kelly, thanks. So in 2017, over 1 million hectares were burned, and that was due to 1,347 fires. I was in 2018, when media would ask me what I thought the fire season was going to be like, I would not have ever guessed that it was going to be higher in terms of hectares burned than forest fires, but that was the case for last year. So we had 1.34 million hectares with over 2,000 fires. I can tell you that the Prince George Fire Center, which is the size of Poland, had over 400 of those fires last year. So yeah, moving on. Definitely with large wildfire seasons, there's a huge impact to humans. So there's just kind of a breakdown information supplied by EMBC of the evacuation orders, alerts, the properties, properties on order, properties on alert, and that last number is the total days of the provincial state of emergency. So yeah, a lot of people were impacted in both 2017 and 2018, and so huge impacts for evac alerts and orders. So a lot of people last summer and the summer before that didn't get to spend much time at home. And the next slide just kind of shows the fire perimeters of the wildfires that burned during 2018. So all of that red that you see on the map of BC. And although the largest of the fires last year were in the Northwest Fire Centre, one unique characteristic of last year was that how widespread the fire activity was across all 6 fire centres. So in 2017, the majority of the fires were in the Caribou Fire Centre in Kamloops, and not so much across the rest of the province. So that was really unique last year, that every single fire centre had over 10 wildfires of note, and there was big, large, destructive fires everywhere. So I'm just going to give a brief forecast for 2019. And just a quick note here, so like the 6 of the last 10 wildfire seasons have been above average for area burnt. And when I first started with wildfire 4 years ago, I used to ask people quite naively in April, and I'd say, oh, what do you think the fire season's going to be like? And they would always say to me, we'll tell you in October. And, people would say, oh, I think, we'll definitely have a slow year, or it's going to rain, or we're going to get washed out. And now that I'm in my 4th season, I've felt that no one really talks about those things anymore. And they just, we're just kind of preparing and, preparing for what is to come for this year. So that sentiment of a slow season doesn't seem to be voiced that often than what it was 4 years ago. Just change slides here. So the columns that you see there for, you see a drought code column, which is beside locations, and you'll see a buildup index column, which is beside the drought code. So drought codes, for those of you who don't know, indicates longer term drought conditions, and the BUI indicates short and long term drought conditions. So you will see that the DC numbers, so the first column, which indicate lower drought, but the BUIs are relatively low. So essentially, long story short, this just tells us that the fall precipitation has recharged the moisture in the upper layer of the organic layer, so 0 to 6 centimeters in depth, but the lower layer, which is 6 centimeters and more, is still quite dry, and that's just kind of due to the drought conditions that we've seen across BC. Given that many areas of BC have a shallow organic layer, this may not be a major issue, but we definitely have, we're currently factoring in overwinter precipitation to adjust for the spring startup values, but we definitely have not had as much rain as we had before, and with that DC layers and that low, that soil is dry, and so that is definitely concerning. And, to follow up, you can see the rainfall of that we've had. So, kind of across the board, all are, generally lower than the historical medium. So we just have not seen the rain, that's needed in order to get down to that DC level and to, make sure that that's not dry. So, moving on here. So just kind of a summary, we've had average to below snowpacks, above normal temperatures for April, May, and June, and below normal precipitation for most of the province. Our forecasters do think that there will be a little wetter or more rain in the south and southwest, but for the whole summer, that's really not that conclusive as such right now. So yeah, just the forecast is that we are going to see generally above seasonal temperatures, and there is thought that we may have some more rain, but it's not going to be enough rain. No season-ending rainfalls, predicted this season. So kind of generally back to an above seasonal, lack of rain summer. So yeah, like I said, slightly above normal, but the rest of the province should be near normal. And again, we'll just have to wait to see if that comes to fruition. So just a bit of a quick summary. So again, above seasonal temperatures expected. There's a low confidence in the precipitation forecast. However, the trend is towards a slightly higher than normal amount. So we are predicting another busy season. Western Canada will likely be busier than the East. And the caveat here is the actual severity of fire seasons will be highly dependent on the local short-range weather patterns, such as timing and amount of rainfall, length of drying periods, thunderstorms, and wind events. And these elements cannot be forecasted out this far. So last year in 2018, right before the August long weekend, the whole province was supposed to get soaked completely with rain, and I was actually upset because I was supposed to be having some vacation time. I'd been so busy throughout the entire season. Anyway, the Thursday before the long weekend, the forecast changed, and that rain never happened. And when I came back from my trip, we were in a state of emergency, and there was fires again all over the landscape. So, we really, weather's a huge part of our business, but we just look at these short-term, it's very hard to predict, and things can change like they did last year. So the role of FireSmart, FireSmart's a brand owned by FireSmart Canada that includes a comprehensive set of tools and guidance on how to undertake and implement community-based wildfire prevention and mitigation initiatives. As Kelly has mentioned before, FireSmart is really based on the premise of shared responsibility and promoting that integration and collaboration of wildfire prevention and mitigation. It's founded on 7 disciplines that are under the responsibility or mandate of different organizations and or levels of government. Leadership and cooperation between the responsible agencies is necessary to fully realize the benefits of implementing FireSmart principles. So no one can do this by themselves. It all has to be done together. Why should everyone care? So during the fire season, British Columbians may be evacuated from their communities and homes may be destroyed. Someone going through a wildfire event could potentially be the most traumatic experience in their life. And as my role as an information officer, I spend all my time dealing with the public, and I have a number of stories and phone calls that I've had to talk to people, and it's heartbreaking listening to people that have potentially left their home and they don't know if they can get back. So, it's a very traumatic experience for people, and it breaks my heart when I have to talk to these people and they're going through that. So, you're the best protection. Your best protection is prevention, and your tool is the FireSmart program. So like I was saying, so wildfire prevention begins before the fire occurs, and it's in our own backyard. So FireSmart is a shared responsibility. So, I think everyone in BC has a role to play during fire season, and for the public that aren't involved with firefighting, it's FireSmart, and it's preparing their property and themselves for the upcoming season. Because doing these things during a fire it doesn't work. Everyone needs to do this stuff before. So the BC FireSmart Committee, it was established in May 2017 just to ensure greater direction and integration of the 7 FireSmart disciplines across the province. Kelly, I'll get you to change the slide there. So the committee consists of a bunch of different members. So we've got the Ministry of Flynn-Roe Ard, which is where BC Wildfire falls into. We have Office of the Fire Commissioner, Union of BC Municipalities, the Fire Chiefs Association, EMBC, the Forest Enhancement Society, FNES, the First Nations Emergency Services Society, and FireSmart Canada. So the whole purpose of the committee is just to collaboratively maintain and improve the delivery of the BC FireSmart program and ensuring alignment with the 7 FireSmart disciplines to better support wildfire preparedness, prevention, and mitigation in BC. So in meeting our purpose, we will commit to aligning with FireSmart Canada, developing an annual work plan, budget, and providing stakeholders and interested parties with one governing agency for FireSmart in BC. So, yeah. Thank you, Kelly. So what the BC FireSmart Committee is up to. So one thing that I've been really involved with in terms of facilitation is the BC Local FireSmart Representative Workshop Series. So we have our last one next week in Fort St. John, but we've had them all over the province in Williams Lake, Prince George, Smithers, down in Cranbrook and Kamloops. After Fort St. John, we'll take a break over the summer, and then they'll do another round of these for 2019 in the fall and spring of 2020. As Kelly was mentioning, the Wildfire Community Preparedness Day is the weekend of May 4th and 5th. So we're engaging with our partners and with BC Wildfire of getting events organized for that. And FireSmart Friday, which is on our Facebook, and there's lots of tips and tools that's posted on our website on the Facebook once a week. So definitely, if you have Facebook and you are interested in following of what's going on in FireSmart BC, definitely follow that page. So I think we've spoke about what is FireSmart, but essentially it's just living with and managing for wildfire in your area and on your property. So I just also briefly talked about the BC FireSmart Committee. And a regional FireSmart Committee those are being developed as we speak, and they're a bit of a small scale compared to the provincial BC FireSmart Committee. And the hope is that there will be one regional FireSmart Committee in each of the fire centers. So there would be one somewhere in the Prince George Fire Center, Northwest, Caribou, Kamloops, Southeast, and Coastal. You know, the BC FireSmart Committee provides with you guys some direction and support, and you know, there's lots of things that the committee can help you with. They can suggest activities for the regional FireSmart committees, and the regional FireSmart committees can kind of be their ears and eyes of what's going on locally. And they can give suggestions on the regional FireSmart committee structure and kind of the next steps moving forward. Kelly? So we'll just go to, this is something that I've worked on over the winter. I really truly believe that if you want to bring change to people, then you need to, it's best to get the students and the kids. So my colleague Forrest Tower, who's a person and not a thing, him and I over the winter worked on the FireSmart BC education package. So we broke it down into 4 different groups, as you can see on the PowerPoint there. I won't go into all the detail, but it's really exciting, and all of the soft material will be available on that website that I mentioned in the beginning. Someone had mentioned to me that their analogy for this program was, you know, this is the new recycling program of 2019. So I saw that poll. You know, a number of you aren't that familiar with FireSmart, and that our hope is that you know, when you see the FireSmart logo, you'll know, and that everyone in BC will know what the FireSmart logo is. So, yeah, and we feel that this educational tool will be a huge part of educating the entire province of what FireSmart is. So this is the website, www.firesmartbc.ca, that was launched end of January. So all of the just go to the next slide there, Kelly. As you can see, as I was mentioning, there's a workshop next week in Fort St. John, so you can find out all the events and courses. So the courses that will be available for next year will be available to sign up through this website. All the other disciplines of FireSmart, the emergency planning, interagency cooperation, are also available on the website. It's just on the next slide here. So long story short, this website is a huge tool and a resource, and a great way to expose yourself to FireSmart and to find out what is going on across the province. And you can learn about each of the 7 disciplines. And like I said before, all of the educational, the soft material is available online for anyone in BC to print off and to go through. And one of the great things that I was mentioning is the resource library, so you can get brochures and guides, latest articles, research, links, posters and graphics and videos and online resource ordering. So like I said, it was launched a couple months ago, so it's building and building and building, but it's a fantastic resource, so I highly recommend anyone on this call to go check it out. And just lastly, there's like a words wall, so at some of these LFRs, we've been asking people, give us, write a sentence of what the last 2 days have been. So anyway, this wall is beginning to grow, but it's nice to see that, things like empowering the community to protect themselves, build relationships with homeowners. So people are starting to understand that it really is a shared responsibility. And I think the public likes that. I think they are empowered and that they can help, they can do their part during wildfire seasons. And then just lastly, one of the other things they have is the FireSmart Community Recognition Program. There's 46 communities across BC that are already recognized, so you'll be able to see on the website kind of where these communities are. And as I know that there's more that are pending, and so you'll see more of these flames kind of across BC. So if you have any information, if you want to get a hold of a local FireSmart representative, you can scroll down to the bottom and you can find out your local LFRs. If you have any questions, you can send an email. And yeah, I think that is. Any questions?
There are questions, Amanda. Would you like to play the video now, or would you like to go straight to the questions?
Yeah, if we can play the video, great.
Yeah.
Okay, I will try and get it going. Okay, my apologies. For some reason, it has decided not to show today. So we'll go straight to the questions. Do you work with any First Nations communities as well?
Yeah, we do. We work really closely with Finesse, and I would say like Finesse is more involved with the kind of fire smarting their community, but if any First Nations is interested, then best to contact Finesse, or they can send an email to Kelsey. But yeah, we definitely work with First Nations, and Finesse is very well involved with that whole idea, with that.
Awesome. And are there any adaptation or are there any resources in BC or Canada to support business continuity after a forest fire has occurred or wildfire has occurred?
That's a really good question, but I don't know the answer to that, so I can follow up with that individual if they want, but I don't have that information.
Okay.
And from a Canada perspective, we actually haven't, that's an intention to start working on those resources, but it's that is definitely something that does need to be addressed. And just a reminder that it is partners in protection. And as I mentioned, I'm a forester and a fire kind of guy, but there's lots of room for business folks that understand that world to join and become part of the solution.
Great, thank you. And another question, is there coordination with the Alaska Fire Science Consortium?
I would have to ask Kelsey that.
So there's we coordinate through some of our partnerships. We coordinate generally through the U.S. Forest Service, the National Fire Protection Association, the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, and the Fire Adapted Communities Coalition. From the FireSmart Canada perspective, there's no direct, and because of that, we end up having access to a lot of the fire science resources across the border, including what comes out of Alaska. But direct relationships with FireSmart Canada are not there, and as indicated, we can follow up to see if British Columbia is engaging or how they are.
Great, thank you. When will the education program for schools be released?
Forrest and I created 42 of these educational kits. Every zone and every fire center has one of those kits. So like a school could contact a zone and ask for a presentation. The next phase of this project is that Forrest and I will be coming up with a way in order for people to order the package, and then the eventual goal is trying to get FireSmart education part of the BC curriculum, but that's kind of, the next phase. But if anyone's would like the hard copy of the kit, they can reach out to their local fire zone. So if there's 42 kits out there and they've all been delivered, they can download the soft material on the website. I know that's been made available under the education discipline, but if any local governments or public want the hard kit for this year right now, they're just going to have to contact the zone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds really, really great to have those educational opportunities. Another question about education: what funding is provided for FireSmart education events, if any?
I know that people through the CRI program, the Community Resiliency Initiative, they are able to ask for educational dollars that go towards, educational material. It's kind of all that I know from that point. I don't know much else about that kind of funding.
Great. There's a question on when will the Wildfire Community Preparedness Day be in Haida Gwaii?
So it's a provincial date. So it's kind of everyone's the May 4th, 5th weekend. So there's not a specific date for a specific location. So best for them to reach out to their local zones or communities and to find out if anything's been planned.
Great.
And the intention of the Community Wildfire Preparedness Day is for the communities to take a grassroots initiative in getting something started for that. So obviously it's only, not too long away from right now at this time period for this year, but the advertising and outreach for it starts in late fall, early winter of the previous year. So if they missed it this year for any local initiatives, please keep an eye out for it for the following year, the late fall, winter 2019.
Great, good to know. One question: is the Regional FireSmart Committee adding another layer of bureaucracy?
Go ahead.
I feel like you go for it, Kelly.
Okay. So what we're, as I mentioned, the FireSmart program is really it's meant to be an empowerment and engagement program and grassroots. And, the graph that I displayed where it shows it's everybody's challenge is what we're really trying to do with these layers is to minimize any bureaucracy, but to provide a two-way voice for folks right down to those local levels. And so it's very difficult, for folks to get engaged with FireSmart Canada, local folks, homeowners, and local communities to get engaged with FireSmart Canada. When we have our annual general meetings and membership meetings, it's usually somewhere either east or west Canada. And then same with the BC FireSmart Committee, the meetings are generally in one place in British Columbia, and it's still a pretty big province. So the idea is that, these meetings and discussions can occur at a more local level, and then the communications for that can be a two-way street to pass things up to that hierarchy to help facilitate communications rather than hinder it.
Okay, great, thank you. There was a question on when you showed, Amanda, the image of the community recognition, were the little flames or the little trophies the communities that have been recognized?
Yeah, the little flame on the map, those are communities that have already been recognized. And once a community has been recognized, then they go for renewal they go for renewal. But from my understanding, those flames are communities that have already been recognized, and more will be put on the map. I think there's a lot that are pending. So
great. And then to follow up with that, this is the second part of the question. Why was it that flames were chosen? This person's wondering, maybe there's something a bit more hopeful that could be chosen for the image of recognized communities.
I can't speak to that. It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if Kelly has anything he can add to that question.
So I think you're using the FireSmart logo, which is really, when you look at it, what it is it's a house inside a circle where the flames are burning around the circle. And the intent of the symbolism of that logo is that the house, it remains resilient even though there's fire on the landscape surrounding the house or the community. So that's the symbolism of the logo. So it's not just a flame, it's actually a house within that bubble or circle and in the flames surrounding that, recognizing the role of fire on the landscape.
Okay, great. And how does fire smarting your property relate to the idea of xeriscaping principles promoted in communities that are in a drier climate?
We do actually have a FireSmart landscape guide to landscaping, which we put together where we've aligned the water usage of plants that have low water usage and are also considered FireSmart or low flammability. And that was meant to demonstrate or actually address that question of, yes, you can have a xeriscaped or a water smart property that is still FireSmart. And that guide is available online as well.
Okay, thank you. One individual notes that they think that the whole Lower Mainland is in a risky situation. And do you know what the governments are doing in that area?
Amanda, are you able to take that?
I can't specifically talk about, I don't know what the government is doing, but I think every homeowner can do their part and ensure that their home is FireSmart would be my recommendation. That I think, there's hazard all over BC, but the thing that you have control over is your home. So that's kind of all the messaging that I have. I don't specifically know what the government is doing, but I do know that everyone has a part to play in FireSmart, and there's risk everywhere. So I would assess my home and ensure that it's FireSmart and that I'm doing my part.
There also are a number of Lower Mainland local governments that have community wildfire protection plans in place, and so I would advise the person to ask their local government, about the community wildfire protection plan, and that should outline, give them a pretty good idea of what is being done or planned to be done to address wildfire risk in their area.
Great. Another question, how might climate change affect FireSmart programs?
Okay, so yeah, climate change is definitely, a concern that's being looked at by wildfire professionals across the country and internationally. There's indications that it's changing the way fire burns a lot along the landscape. But the FireSmart program that we've outlined here, as far as the home ignition zone areas and the community protection, has the ability to adapt to that type of fire behavior and changes. And, as new science comes on board, that's our job at the as Partners in Protection in the FireSmart Canada program, in partnership with the BC FireSmart Committee, to incorporate that science and develop new best practices as we see changes. So adaptation at that level as well, fire adaptation.
Right, great. Are FireSmart community representatives / coordinators volunteers, or are their positions paid?
The local LFRs, they are in, it's more of a volunteer based position. So the LFRs, or the workshop that we've been presenting to, are people that are employed in government or regional districts, or locally concerned citizens that want to be involved. But an LFR is not, I don't think it's like a paid position, but I could be wrong.
It could be anything, depending on what the local community adopts that person is. But as Amanda said, it's typically a local government representative, so someone that's on staff, or the local government may engage with a local expert to fill that role. And so there's been a number of communities that have either used grants or, for instance, the old SWIPE funding, which is now the CRI funding, to help support that type of a position in their community.
I do know of examples of local governments who have positions, and that's one of their main tasks, is to do community assessments. But yeah, kind of to what Kelly was saying as well.
Great. I misspoke previously on the question about Haida Gwaii. They were actually wondering when they're going to get the LFR course.
They are more than, I can't confirm if a course will be held in Haida Gwaii, but and when we had our last one in Smithers, there were people from all over BC. So I recommend just following the website, and there will be more. There'll probably be 6 more next year, starting in October. But I can't confirm where those locations will be yet.
Okay. And we have about 2 more minutes, so maybe about 3 more questions to go. There's more than 3 questions though, so if anybody wants to follow up, please feel free to email either myself or Jim. And I apologize for this setup. I can't see the questions fully and have it full screen with my PowerPoint. So do you have any representation from the land conservation organizations?
Right now, I don't. I mean, I'm just thinking of the membership list for FireSmart Canada, and I don't recall anyone from any of the land conservation organizations. We do have, for instance, the Columbia Basin Trust and Fraser Basin, Fraser Watershed folks involved in FireSmart in this method. But if there's folks that want to join FireSmart and Partners in Protection and become part of the solution again, they're fully welcome.
Wonderful. And last question, are you aware of any grant opportunities for FireSmart activities?
Yeah, I think that's actually, again, Amanda mentioned it, is through the CRI funding, the Community Resilience Initiative. FireSmart is identified as a eligible program through that funding.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much for your wonderful and very informative presentation today. And thank you to all of the attendees who were able to gain knowledge from this presentation and contribute their own thoughts and questions.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.